Well, turn in your Bibles, please, to Genesis chapter 24. Genesis chapter 24. It's on page 23, slightly disappointingly, of the church Bibles. Page 23, it should be easy to find. Very first book of the Bible, and flick through till you find a big, bold 24. And we're going to read the whole chapter, but like I said, we're going to read it in chunks, and I'll give comment there, so we'll experience this story going through and hopefully explain it as we're going. The theme of this chapter really is blessing. It's a recurring motif. It's one that's mirrored. Here's a fun little fact in Rebecca's name. Here's we're going to meet Rebecca, and her name sounds a bit like the Hebrew word for blessing. It's kind of if you turn some of the letters round, it's kind of the same. It's Berakah as opposed to Rebecca, and this chapter introduces the big players in the next part of the story. We've got Isaac, Rebecca, and Laban, all with the character traits that we're going to see impact the narrative in what happens next. So we've got Isaac, kind of a passive character. He doesn't really act as much as get acted upon. And that's kind of encouraging for some of us who are passive. It's not necessarily a bad thing to be a sort of passive personality. We've got Rebecca, who's active. She's energetic. She is a doer. She makes things happen. We've got Laban, a worldly character with his eye on profit. And as these different characters are introduced, we're going to see how they fit into the story that God is telling. So let's read the first 9 verses 1 to 9. Genesis 24. Abraham was now very old, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. He said to the senior servant in his household, the one in charge of all that he had, "Put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I am living, but will go to my country and my own relatives and get a wife for my son Isaac." The servant asked him, "What if the woman is unwilling to come back with me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the country you came from?" "Make sure that you do not take my son back there," Abraham said. "The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household and my native land, and who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying, 'To your offspring I will give this land.' He will send his angel before you so that you can get a wife for my son from there. If the woman is unwilling to come back with you, then you will be released from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there." So the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore an oath to him concerning this matter. So we see here the final speech of Abraham. This is the last recorded words of Abraham we have in the Bible, although he's probably going to live for another 35 years. And it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? He employs his most senior servant, kind of, I guess, the head of his household, his right-hand man, to get a wife for Isaac. It's kind of the way it is in Eastern cultures. You arrange weddings, so he wants to arrange this wedding, go and get a wife for Isaac, because Isaac needs a wife, because Abraham's been promised great things, like he said there, "To your offspring I will give this land." Well, that means he needs offspring, and for Isaac to have offspring, he needs a wife. There's this detail about the hand under the thigh. Some of us think that's a bit weird. It's a way, again, in this culture to mark the solemnity and seriousness of the oath that this servant is taking. A hand near the procreative organs. It's perhaps a reminder of the seed promises to Abraham, or the covenant of circumcision. Either way, it's making clear this is serious. I'm trusting God here, and I need you to be on board with this mission. Did you notice how he's so serious and emphatic is Abraham, that firstly, Isaac is not to have a Canaanite wife. Isaac needs a wife, a lot of women in the land. He's not to have any of them. Now, given the motif of blessing through this chapter, this is probably in some way linked to the curse that Noah, if you remember way back earlier in Genesis, that Noah spoke against Canaan, the man from whom the Canaanites are descended. The Canaanites are the people Abraham's descendants will displace. And so they're not to be interbred with. And again, we struggle to think this through it because of our modern ways of thinking, but Abraham's showing trust in God through this. Because what he could have done if he was trying to do things himself, like marrying Isaac into the Canaanites, would be a good way, wouldn't it, of making God's promises come true. Like doing it ourselves, gain the land according to the flesh. So, Isaac marries in and then he becomes powerful and he kind of takes over the land from inside. And Abraham doesn't want anything to do with that idea. He's trusting completely in God to act, and he's trusting completely in God to provide a suitable wife for Isaac. Like he says, the Lord will send his angel ahead of you. This is an Abraham who has learned to trust God completely. And maybe there's something about Abraham's family in Mesopotamia being Sethites. They are a blessed line, but while, like we'll see, they've heard of the Lord, they've heard of the God of Israel. Not that he's the God of Israel yet, because Israel doesn't exist, but while they've heard of the Lord, and maybe they even worship him, they don't worship him alone. Abraham's family in Mesopotamia are idolaters who worship other gods as well. In some ways, they are no more suitable than the Canaanites. Marriage within family groups is normal, and like we see, there's a symmetry, there's kind of a repeated pattern in God calling another covenant heir out of Mesopotamia. Well, secondly, we see Isaac is not to leave Canaan. He's not to have a Canaanite wife, and Abraham stresses Isaac's not to leave. Now, this is kind of parallel to Abraham securing Sarah a burial site in Canaan, like we saw last time. God has promised them the land, and so if they're going to trust God, that means staying in the land. They don't want to risk missing out on God's blessing. So Isaac, this passive character, he is to stay in the land. That's really the great task of his life. Don't leave. And then thirdly, you notice, and I've already hinted at this, Abraham, even though he sort of says, if she's not willing to come back, then you're released from your oath. If you're not successful, that's fine. But Abraham fully expects a servant to be successful. Note again, he trusts that God is working. I think there's something prophetic happening here as well. He's got some insight, or just he's got such a dependence on God that he knows God is going to make this happen. And so he can give that concession to the servant just so he doesn't feel overburdened if he's like, oh, Abraham sent me to do an impossible task here. That's terrible. He's trusting in God. Now, this is Abraham. This is the same Abraham who let his wife go into Pharaoh's harem, who let his wife go into Abimelech's harem, the same one who tried to create a child of promise through Hagar, who kept trying to do things his own way, and yet at this point, which has only taken 65 years, he has learned to trust in God. We want everyone here to trust in God today, to trust completely in God, but for some of us it takes time. And yet God works as surely over 65 years as he might take over 1 or 2. Let's read the next passage, verses 10 to 28. Then the servant left, taking with him 10 of his master's camels, loaded with all kinds of good things from his master. He set out for Adam Naharaim and made his way to the town of Nahor. He had the camels kneel down near the well outside the town. It was toward evening, the time the women go out to draw water. Then he prayed, Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I'm standing beside this spring and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. May it be that when I say to a young woman, please let down your jar that I may have a drink, and she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too. Let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Before he had finished praying, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. She was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. The woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever slept with her. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. The servant hurried to meet her and said, "Please give me a little water from your jar." "Drink, my lord," she said, and quickly lowered the jar to her hands and gave him a drink. After she had given him a drink, she said, "I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough to drink." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough, ran back to the well to draw more water, and drew enough for all his camels. Without saying a word, the man watched her closely to learn whether or not the Lord has made his journey successful. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took out a gold nose ring weighing a baker and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels. Then he asked, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She answered him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son that Milcah bore to Nahor." And she added, "We have plenty of straw and fodder, as well as room for you to spend the night." Then the man bowed down and worshipped the Lord, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master. As for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my master's relatives." The young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. So we see here the faithful servant, and he is a faithful servant. He's never named, is he? And yet he's just this wonderful, faithful man, and he obeys Abraham. He takes his 10 camels, and at this point of history, that is a very rare and expensive domestic animal. You know, there might be wild camels in that part of the world from that period, but they weren't very much domesticated. It's like turning up with a fleet of 10 really expensive sports cars or something, like, you know, 10 of these sort of luxury stretch limos or something like that. This is an impressive thing to roll up with. It's a sign of just how much God has blessed Abraham financially. And the servant goes to the well, and trusting in God for success, he prays to God for a sign. And it's a sign that has a clear binary yes or no result. That's what's happening in his prayers. If I'm successful, may it be A, or if I'm unsuccessful, may it be B. There's a really clear yes or no, because it would have been normal for any of the women to offer him a drink. Like, this is a hospitable culture. It's standard Middle Eastern hospitality. You know, if there's a traveller there, you offer him a drink. Often travellers would wait to be offered water by the villages that the well belonged to, because they've kind of got the rights of access to this well, so you don't want to presume. You wait for them to invite you. That's just normal. But to offer to water the camels, that's an enormous job. They drink gallons of water, and there is 10 of them. So it's something like, I don't know, I might just be picking this number out of nowhere, but I seem to have read it was like 35 gallons, or it's a crazy amount. Like, you can't put as much fuel in your car as you can put water in a camel, and there's 10 of them. So this is a massive job. It's very unlikely that even a very polite, ordinary woman would make this offer. So this is why the servant's praying this, because it's a sign, if she offers this, that God is intervening, and that this is the woman God has chosen. And you notice, even as he's praying, this woman turns up. Rebekah arrives. Now, we know who she is. He tells us who she is. She's the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, and we know who that is because we were told in the last chapter the other side of Terah's genealogy from his son Abraham. So we have Nahor's family. This is the woman we know, don't we, that he has come to meet, and it is stressed how suitable a bride she is. She's got the right family connections. She's a virgin. Her character is excellent. She just seems generous and active. And I want to I've drawn a little box around this in my notes just to make clear. This is what you could call a type scene. This is kind of a scene that's going to be replayed throughout the book of Genesis and throughout the rest of the Bible. The incident of a bride, a suitable bride, being found at a foreign well. Maybe even just saying it like that, you're already thinking about Jacob meeting Rachel, or you're thinking of Moses meeting Zipporah, or something we're going to be looking at later in John 4. It's a scene that replays again and again through the Bible, and this is the very first time, and it's by far the most detailed one. And so this is the prototype version that we're going to have to keep referring back to. Every time we have an incident like this, we need to think about this and compare them, because that's how God's going to teach us. Well, after this tense moment of waiting, she offers him the water. You're like, yep, I'll give you a drink in verse 18, drink, my Lord. And then there's this really tense moment, isn't there? And then she makes the offer and waters the camels, which is a huge job. Again, we just see what kind of impressive woman, physically impressive Rebecca is. She's going up and down, would have been steps down to this spring or this well, and she's going up and down carrying this jar of water, which doesn't carry that much, so we don't know how many times she has to go up and down those stairs, but I'm impressed. I couldn't have managed it, I know that. And this servant gives her gifts, and in this culture it would probably be obvious that this is a down payment on a bride price. He knows at this point that God has given him success, and that's when he asks who her parents are, and he discovers what we already know, that she's Bethuel's daughter. That means she's descended from both of Abraham's brothers. So Abraham said, go and find someone from my relatives. He couldn't really have found anyone more perfect, could he? And so the servant praises God. There's a good lesson there for any of us. As soon as God answers prayer, praise him. We're often very slow to praise God, and we're just like, we just enjoy the benefits of the answer to prayer instead of praising God for seeing how wonderfully he works, demonstrating his loving kindness, his covenant faithfulness. This unnamed servant has been faithful to Abraham's commands, but he acknowledges in his praise that it is God who is really at work. And that's an idea we need to lock into our heads. We're going to see it repeatedly through Genesis. As people make decisions and people act good and bad, yet behind it all, God is the one who is making history happen. We need to act faithfully, don't we? And sometimes that might mean stepping outside of our comfort zones. Or stepping out without knowing if we're going to find success or not. Now, on one hand, we can't, this is called hyper-Calvinism. We can't assume that faithfulness means just sitting back and doing nothing. That we're just like, God does it, so I'm not going to do anything. But we see that through Abraham's story, there's a difference, isn't there, between acting in faith and seeing God work, and trying to make God's promises come true all by ourselves. This is a difference between Abraham sleeping with Hagar to produce Ishmael, and the difference between Abraham sleeping with a barren Sarah to produce Isaac. In both cases, Abraham had to act. But in one of them, he was acting on his own initiative, trying to make things happen himself. In the other, even though he had to act, he was acting completely trusting God to work. It's a hard balance to get, isn't it? The difference in sharing our faith and seeing sinners saved. We know we have to share our faith. We have to tell people about Jesus. But there's a difference in trying to make them Christians all by ourselves and just acting faithfully, sharing, trusting God to work. Well, let's read the next bit. I don't have quite as many comments on this next section. Let's just read a few verses here, 29 to 33. Now, Rebekah had a brother named Laban, and he hurried out to the man at the spring. As soon as he had seen the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, he had heard Rebekah tell what the man had said to her. But he went out to the man and found him standing by the camels near the spring. "Come, you who are blessed by the Lord," he said. "Why are you standing out here? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So the man went to the house, and the camels were unloaded. Straw and fodder were brought for the camels, and water for him and his men to wash their feet. Then food was set before him, but he said, I will not eat until I have told you what I have to say. Then tell us, Laban said. So we see Rachel, she runs off to share the news of what's happened in this strange incident and all the jewelry she's just been given. And Laban, her brother, runs back out. Now he's acting, it seems, like the head of the family. It's a foreshadowing of what's to follow in Jacob's story. And though he welcomes the man as blessed by the Lord in verse 31, it's clear, isn't it, from what he looks at, like he sees the nose ring and the bracelets. He sees all this worldly wealth. He's more interested in the money that he can get, how Abraham can benefit him financially, than the better blessing that is available through Abraham. And then the servant doesn't beat around the bush, does he? He shows the urgency of his mission by opening negotiations. Like, first, salve, I'm not even going to eat until I've told you what I'm here for. Let's read that. Verse 34 onwards. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master abundantly, and he has become wealthy. He has given him sheep and cattle, silver and gold, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and he's given him everything he owns. And my master made me swear an oath and said, you must not get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but go to my father's family and to my own clan and get a wife for my son. Then I asked my master, what if the woman will not come back with me? He replied, the Lord, before whom I have walked faithfully, will send his angel with you and make your journey a success so that you can get a wife for my son from my own clan and from my father's family. You'll be released from my oath if, when you go to my clan, they refuse to give her to you. Then you will be released from my oath. When I came to the spring today, I said, Lord, God of my master Abraham, if you will, please grant success to the journey on which I have come. See, I am standing beside this spring. If a young woman comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and if she says to me, drink, and I'll draw water for your camels too, let her be the one the Lord has chosen for my master's son. Before I'd finished praying in my heart, Rebekah came out with a jar on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water, and I said to her, please give me a drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I'll water your camels too. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. I asked her, whose daughter are you? She said, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring in her nose and the bracelets on her arms, and I bowed down and worshipped the Lord. I praised the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me on the right road to get the granddaughter of my master's brother for her son. Now, if you will show kindness and faithfulness to my master, tell me. And if not, tell me, so I may know which way to turn. You see, the servant recounts it's like, just heard that, haven't I? The servant recounts his mission in detail to impress on Rebekah's family that it is the Lord at work here. Do you know? So he's saying, this is God at work, guys. Like, don't ignore that fact. And he's asking to be allowed to take her to marry Isaac. And so it's only right, isn't it, that he explain himself properly. It's kind of a big deal. And if you compare, if you want to draw different columns of the order of stuff that he says things, what he said now with what's been narrated before, you'll notice, comparing them, the great tact and diplomacy that he shows. He takes pains not to offend his hosts, and without dishonesty, he frames things in careful ways. He's a skilled negotiator, so you can see why he's risen to be Abraham's right-hand man. He's a very capable guy, and he treads the fine line of trusting God by explaining everything. Like he's not trying to hide from Rebekah's family what's happening. He's like, I'm just going to lay all my cards on the table, and you guys might think I'm crazy. But he seems compelled to speak the truth, and like, God is at work here, and I think you need to recognize this. But he's tactful in the way he does it. Well, let's see how they respond. Let's read verses 50 to 61. Laban and Bethuel answered, "This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here is Rebekah. Take her and go and let her become the wife of your master's son as the Lord has directed." When Abraham's servant heard what they said, he bowed down to the ground before the Lord. Then the servant brought out gold and silver jewelry and articles of clothing and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave costly gifts to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night there. When they got up the next morning, he said, "Send me on my way to my master." But her brother and her mother replied, "Let the young woman remain with us 10 days or so, then you may go." But he said to them, "Do not detain me, now that the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me on my way so I may go to my master." Then they said, "Let's call the young woman and ask about it." So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Will you go with this man?" "I will go," she said. So they sent their sister Rebekah on her way, along with her nurse and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you increase to thousands upon thousands. May your offspring possess the cities of their enemies." Then Rebekah and her attendants got ready and mounted the camels and went back with the man. So the servant took Rebekah and left. So it's amazing, isn't it? Laban and Bethuel agree to send Rebekah back with this servant. They acknowledge God's hand in these events. When they say, "We can say nothing to you one way or the other," they're sort of saying, like, we can't say anything good or bad about this. This has obviously got to work, so we're going to go with God's plan here. Bethuel's mentioned, even while his son has been taking the active role in the negotiations, it's a sign that Laban's not acting without his father's permission. Everything here is above board. The whole family is on board with this plan. The servant gives generous gifts. It's a normal part of marriage arrangements. The bride's family would be paid a bride price, and from which they would provide a dowry. And in the morning, the servant is keen to get back immediately. Remember, he's taken this solemn oath with his hand under Abraham's thigh. He wants to fulfill his obligations. Now, Laban and his mother try to detain this servant. And that doesn't seem unreasonable, does it? Rebekah is going to leave her family forever. I mean, it's hundreds of miles in a time where she's not going to pop back at the weekend or anything like that. She's probably going forever, and then they might hear in the next generation news back. That's kind of the expectation. She's going to live in a foreign land. So 10 days of delay, there's a bit of debate over the actual timings. Maybe they mean 10 months. But it allows for more preparations and for proper goodbyes. I mean, if you've got a daughter of marriageable age, would you sort of, if suddenly a fella turns up with a fleet of limousines and offers you a load of money and says, "I'm bringing her back," and you're like, well, okay, she can marry, but maybe not tomorrow. And yet that's exactly what happens. So they decide to ask Rebekah. They're like, well, let's at least ask her. Think again, in that culture, that's weird. Women didn't get asked what was going to happen. It just happened to them. And it might be, maybe it's that Rebekah's the kind of person well, we better ask her because we'll be in trouble if we don't. Or it certainly gives Rebekah the opportunity to show her willingness. And the author is letting us know just how willing she is. And again, this is a wonderful foreshadowing of Jacob's story. You see, Laban, he tries to detain Abraham's servant, but because of Rebekah's willingness to submit to God's will and tie herself to Abraham's family, Laban is unsuccessful. Can't even keep him 10 days. Whereas Jacob, he's someone forever wrestling with God, trying to do things his own way. And Laban, will successfully detain him for 20 years. Now we learn through Genesis that things go easier when we do things God's way in the first place. We can learn things the hard way like Jacob, or we could just do it God's way in the first place and find that that is a much shorter route to blessing than trying and failing to do things ourselves. Well, moving on, we see that Rebekah gets sent off with her family, blessing her in ways that should remind us of God's promises to Abraham. She's being cast in some ways as like a new Abraham, someone being brought out of pagan idolatry in Mesopotamia, but someone who is willing to hear God's call and respond, I will go. It's a reminder of how God works, especially if we're wondering about those outside of the promise. You know, people like the Canaanites. Abraham's blessing descends through Isaac. But Rebekah here can enter into Abraham's blessing by aligning herself with God's chosen covenant heir. You see, God is constantly, he's like a baker. He's folding in people from outside the covenant line into the covenant family. Now, later in the Bible, this will even be true of Canaanites, the people whose offspring, whose Rebekah's offspring, whose cities they will possess. You've got Rahab. She joins the people of Israel, and she ends up being one of the ancestors of the Messiah. Or you've got Moabites like Ruth, another person who ends up being in the line that leads to Jesus. Genesis, you see, is a story, and I hope we've seen this, of God planning blessing for all mankind. It's not just those biologically descended from Abraham. Blessing is available to all those who bless God's chosen. Now, God, through Jesus, makes it possible for anyone to be part of his family. It doesn't matter your race, your ethnicity, it doesn't matter the family you were born into. The offer is there and it is open. The only question is, are we willing? Let's read the last few verses here, 62 to 67. Now Isaac had come from Beer Lahai-roi, for he was living in the Negev. He went out to the field one evening to meditate, and as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. Rebekah also looked up and saw Isaac. She got down from her camel and asked the servant, "Who is that man in the field coming to meet us?" "He is my master," the servant answered. So she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done. Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Now finally, Rebekah and the servant traveled back to Canaan. To Isaac now, not Abraham. It's almost a happily ever after, isn't it? She dons her veil. It's a sign of their impending marriage. You know, a veil was worn by a bride until the consummation of the marriage. And that's hinting to what's going to happen with Jacob, where, you know, Laban tricks him into marrying the wrong sister because she's veiled. But Isaac and Rebekah marry, and Isaac loves her. That's an interesting order, isn't it? It's marriage first, then love. That's not one that our culture recognizes, but it is marriage done right. It's going to be contrasted with Jacob, who loves first, and then he marries, and he makes a right mess of it. We see here two people committing to love and serve each other, even when their marriage has been arranged by their families. That's a very, very high view of marriage, isn't it? It's like admitting this marriage is bigger than either of us. And love is a fruit of marriage done right, not necessarily like our culture would see it as the only reason to get or to stay married. If you're struggling with this, let me just ask, is it better to marry the person you love or love the person you marry? Well, as we close, dominating these last few verses are the great figures of the women in Isaac's life, living in the Negev near the well where Hagar met with God. That's Be'er Lahai. He's comforted after his mother's death, and it's a picture, even though Sarah's gone, of just what a good mother she was. Sarah had her faults, but Isaac loved his mummy. And that's beautiful, isn't it? And then Rebecca, she assumes the role of the matriarch of this family in Sarah's tent. And I say this, you might think, well, that's not really important. It's because the patriarchal narratives, that's what we call, these passages in Genesis. They're very much that. They're patriarchal. They are man-focused. It's about men. And yet this passage shows us just how highly God thinks of women. The ones without whom the covenant promises, which are promises made to men, would come to nothing. Just as all nations would be blessed in Abraham, all mankind, male and female, will be blessed. This good news is good news for men and women. This is a chapter all about blessing. Blessing arranged by the sovereign care of a providential, ruling God. Everyone is in the right place at the right time, and things go smoothly because people accept God's way of doing it. Do we want to be blessed? Because that is the business that God is about. He makes it happen, however unlikely it may seem. Will we trust in God's promise and in his promised covenant heir? We see that in Jesus. Will we align ourselves with him? Will we enter his family? Will we become his bride? And will we be blessed? Well, let's sing 848, Lord of our Dawning. Perhaps someone would go and give a knock on the Sunday school.